6 seals trapped. Comms dead. The last message. We're in a kill zone. Then a single, impossible shot echoes from a ridge no one could climb. The hunter just became the hunted. The valley known as Serac's Maw was a fresh wound carved into the planet's crust. Its walls were jagged teeth of granite and blue-black ice that gnawed at a perpetually gray sky. Down here, below the screaming winds of the peaks, the silence was a physical weight, broken only by the brittle crunch of boots on frost-shattered scree. This was a place that didn't just feel empty, it felt hungry. It was into this throat of stone that a 6-man SEAL team, call sign Viper 1, descended. They moved like wraiths, a synchronized dance of muscle and shadow honed by 1,000 rehearsals in places just as unforgiving. Every piece of gear was taped down, every buckle muffled. The only sound they made was the whisper of their Gore-Tex against the cold. Leading the point was Commander Marcus Thorne, a man whose face was a testament to a life lived on the razor's edge. His eyes, the color of a winter sea, missed nothing. They swept every overhang, every crevice, every dark slash in the rock that could hide a threat. On paper, the mission was a scalpel strike. Disable a clandestine comms relay tucked into a high alpine alcove. Intelligence, usually reliable, suggested a skeleton crew. A dozen guards at most. A ghost stop. But a cold knot had been tightening in Thorne's gut since the briefing. It wasn't just the terrain, which was hostile enough to be an enemy in itself. It was a ghost in the machine. Hours before deployment, a critical piece of their digital package had simply vanished. The three-dimensional thermal scan of Serac's Maw, a file that painted a picture of every heat signature, every hidden vent, every potential warm body in the valley, was gone. Not corrupted, not moved. Scrubbed from a server with a digital precision that spoke of intent, not error. The base's cyber analysts had waved it off. Server hiccup, Commander. We're running a diagnostic. Thorne knew better. Servers didn't have hiccups that surgically removed the one file that could tell you if you were walking into a freezer or a furnace. Behind him, Jake Hotshot, Riley moved with the coiled energy of a predator straining at a leash. He was young, brilliant, and possessed a confidence that bordered on arrogance. His movements were flawless but lacked the patient, water-like flow of the older operators. He kept glancing up at the towering spires of ice and rock, his jaw tight. "This place gives me the creeps. Marcus," he muttered over their private comms channel, his voice a low rasp. Too quiet. Thorne didn't turn. He brought a gloved hand up, a subtle, two-finger gesture. "Stay focused. Eyes on your sector." Feelings were a luxury you couldn't afford in a place like this. You trusted your gut, but you acted on what you could see. They had been moving for nearly an hour, the comms relay now appearing on their HUDs, less than a click away. The passage narrowed, the rock walls pressing in so close they could touch both sides with outstretched arms. The air grew still, the wind's mournful sigh dying away. It was the perfect place for an ambush. A natural funnel. They fanned out, melting into the shadows, rifles raised, safeties off. Thorne held up a closed fist, signaling halt. He closed his eyes, listening not with his ears but with the soles of his boots, feeling the ground for the subtle vibrations of movement. He tasted the air, searching for the unnatural scent of gun, oil, or foreign tobacco. Nothing. Only the cold, sterile smell of rock and ice. The silence should have been a comfort. But to a man like Thorne, absolute silence wasn't peace. It was a lie, and they had just walked right into the middle of it. The world didn't explode. It tore apart. The first sound was a dry, vicious crack from high on the cliff face to their right. The unmistakable report of a high-caliber sniper rifle. The round, a supersonic Hornet, slammed into the rock inches above Hotshot's head, showering him with granite dust and ice splinters. Before the echo died, hell opened up from the left. A heavy machine gun, a DSHK by the sound of its deep, guttural roar, began chewing into their cover. The 12.7mm rounds hit with the force of jackhammers, punching molten pockmarks into the ancient stone, each impact a small, violent explosion. Then, the final piece of the trap snapped shut. From behind them, Cutting off their only path of retreat came the sharp, staccato bark of multiple AKs. 3 directions. High, low, rear. It wasn't a trap. It was a tomb. Contact. 3 o'clock high. 9 o'clock left. 6 o'clock rear. Hotshot's voice, usually laced with swagger, was a strained, desperate bark. We're boxed in. Get down. Find cover. Thorne's command was a primal roar, swallowed by the deafening symphony of destruction. They flattened themselves against the unforgiving rock, making themselves as small as possible. The air became a lethal storm of copper and lead. Bullets whined and ricocheted, their high-pitched screams a counterpoint to the thunder of a machine gun. The fire wasn't random. It was brutally methodical, a textbook L-shaped ambush with a rear blocking element. It was designed to pin them, to break them, to slaughter them where they stood. Thorne crawled to a small outcrop, the stone vibrating against his cheek from the constant impacts. He thumbed the transmit button on his radio. Viper 1 actual to command. We are in a kill zone. Repeat, kill zone. Ambush, coordinates grid. The radio answered with a blast of white noise, a harsh, electronic shriek that clawed at his ears. He switched frequencies. More static. He tried the emergency satellite channel. Nothing. A hollow, mocking hiss. Jammed. Completely and utterly jammed. They were alone. A cold, venomous dread, an emotion Thorne hadn't truly felt in years, began to uncoil in his stomach. This was more than a well-laid trap. This was an execution. The enemy knew their numbers, their route, their objective. The missing thermal scan wasn't a server hiccup. It was a stolen blueprint. The thought sent a jolt of ice through his veins. He remembered the ghost's story, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones at the forward operating base. A story about a Wraith recon team that had vanished in this very canyon years ago. No survivors, no bodies, no radio calls. They just disappeared. The official report called it a climbing accident, but the whispers said otherwise. They said Serac's maw had swallowed them whole. Now, Thorne knew the story was true, and they were living the sequel. Through his scope, a high-magnification window into the chaos, he saw the brutal geometry of their predicament. The machine gun team was dug in on a ledge, laying down a relentless wall of lead. The sniper was perched on a spire high above, taking patient, aimed shots at any flicker of movement. The infantry element was behind them, methodically closing the distance. There were no flanking routes, nowhere to climb out. The sky above was a lid of iron-gray clouds, killing any chance of air support. Hotshot, wedged in a crevice nearby, turned his helmeted head towards Thorne. Through the polarized lens of his visor, Thorne could see the younger man's eyes, wide with a question he couldn't answer. What now? Thorne had no answer. He had 2 options, both of them fatal. A slow, grinding death by 1,000 cuts, or a final, desperate charge into the teeth of the guns. He watched as a sniper round obliterated a chunk of rock next to his point man's helmet. The cold, unyielding pressure of the stone against his cheek, the ceaseless, heart-pounding drum of automatic fire, the whistle of projectiles searching for a home in his flesh. It was a symphony of despair. And then, the symphony stopped. It didn't end with a whimper. It ended with a sound that tore through the fabric of the firefight, a sound so alien and powerful it seemed to come from the mountain itself. It was a deep, resonant thump, impossibly loud and clear. It wasn't the sharp crack of the enemy sniper's rifle or the chaotic chatter of the AKs. It was the voice of something much larger, much more powerful. It came from above, from a direction that made no sense. A single, needle-like spire of rock and ice that Thorne's own team had marked on their maps as unscalable. A dead zone they had named the Widow's Needle. The sound hung in the air for a heartbeat, an echo that resonated in the bones, as if someone had struck a colossal bell made of ice. Then, the heavy machine gun to their left, the one that had been methodically trying to pulverize them, fell silent. Thorne's heart hammered against his ribs. He snapped his binoculars up, panning towards the ledge where the DSHK had been nested. The gunner, a dark shape against the snow, was slumped forward over his weapon, motionless. A clean hit. No warning shot, no suppression. One sound, one kill. The gunfire from the other two enemy positions faltered. The sudden, shocking silence from their heaviest weapon had broken their rhythm. A wave of confusion, visible even from a distance, rippled through the ambushers. They were no longer the hunters. Something else was on the field. From his crevice, Hotshot let out a strangled whisper, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. Who the hell was that? The question hung in the frozen air, unanswered. The silence that followed was broken only by the wind, which now seemed to carry a new, electric tension. Thorne's eyes were glued to his scope, sweeping the barren, vertical face of the Widow's Needle. He saw nothing. No movement, no glint of scope, no puff of smoke. The ridge was a blank, impossible canvas. The ambushers, now completely disoriented, began shouting. Their panicked voices, thin and reedy on the wind, were a torrent of confusion and fear. They had planned for a 6-man SEAL team in a perfectly prepared kill zone. They had not planned for a ghost on a mountain they believed was empty. The second thump came with the same brutal, uncompromising efficiency. It struck the enemy sniper on the high ground to their right. His rifle, a long black shadow, clattered onto the rocks. His body followed a second later, tumbling lifelessly into a deep snowdrift below. 2 sounds, 2 primary threats eliminated. The remaining enemy soldiers, now stripped of their long-range support, began to completely unravel. Their fire became wild, panicked, their rounds impacting harmlessly against the cliffs. They were shooting at shadows, at a fear they couldn't see. Thorne felt a strange, chilling sensation wash over him. It was a mixture of profound relief and a primal, almost superstitious awe. He knew rifles. He knew the distance to that spire was well over 2 kilometers. He knew the vicious, unpredictable crosswinds in this canyon. Those shots weren't just skilled. They were a masterpiece of ballistics, a perfect marriage of science, instinct, and an impossible knowledge of the terrain. He'd seen shots like this before, but only in classified after-action reports, in the hushed legends of ghost operatives who didn't officially exist. He thought back to the missing thermal scan, the file that had been scrubbed clean. Someone hadn't just stolen it. Someone had used it. Then the third thump. The final, brutal punctuation mark. This one hit the commander of the hostile force, a man who had stood up from behind the pine cover to rally his disintegrating troops. He dropped without a sound. 3 shots, 3 key targets, 3 kills. The remaining enemy soldiers, leaderless and terrified, broke. They turned and fled, a panicked, disorganized mob scrambling back into the treacherous folds of the valley. The kill zone had become a graveyard. The tomb had become an escape route. The silence that followed was different now. It was not the oppressive, waiting silence of the trap, but the stunned, disbelieving silence of survival. Thorne slowly lowered his binoculars, his breath misting in the cold. He looked at his team, all of them still pressed against the stone, their faces a mixture of confusion and raw relief. Hotshot was the first to speak, his voice barely a whisper. "Commander!" "Who was that?" Thorne didn't answer. His gaze was fixed on the impossible peak of the Widow's Needle. According to every map, every satellite scan, every piece of intelligence they had, that spire was a barren, untouchable crag. A dead zone. And yet, from that dead zone, a ghost had just saved their lives. Miles away, the sterile, climate-controlled air of the Echo Ridge 12 Command Center hummed with a low thrum of contained panic. Here, the war was a clean, digitized affair played out on glowing screens. The air smelled of recycled oxygen, ozone from the servers, and the bitter tang of stale coffee. Officers with tense, shadowed faces bent over their terminals, their voices sharp, clipped commands that did little to hide the anxiety rippling through the room. On the main holographic display in the center of the room, a 3-dimensional, sapphire blue projection of Serac's maw rotated slowly. Inside it, 6 green dots, representing Viper 1, were static, surrounded by a pulsing, angry red bloom that indicated hostile fire. In a quiet, forgotten corner of the room, almost blending into the banks of humming servers, sat Alina Echo Vance. At 40, she was a study in deliberate inconspicuousness. Her hair, a severe cut the color of steel, was pulled back so tightly it seemed to defy the softness of her features. Her eyes, a startling shade of gray that seemed to hold the memory of a winter storm, were fixed on her own monitor. She wore the standard issue analyst fleece jacket, but on her small, wiry frame, it looked less like a uniform and more like a disguise. To her colleagues, a collection of grizzled intelligence veterans and sharp, ambitious young data crunchers, she was simply the ghost tech. The nickname was a half-joking acknowledgement of her silent, almost invisible presence and her uncanny ability to solve complex data problems without ever saying a word. They rarely spoke to her, and she seemed to prefer it that way. Her world was not the chaotic one playing out on the central holodisplay. Her world was a private, high-resolution topographic scan of Serac's maw, a personal sandbox she had been living in for weeks. To the others, it was a grid of elevation lines and color-coded threat zones. To Alina, it was a living, breathing entity. It was a diary etched in stone, a book she had read 1,000 times. She saw not just the peaks and valleys, but the subtle thermal updrafts, the way the wind scoured snow from one face and deposited it on another, the precise angle of the sun at dawn. She saw the hidden paths, the forgotten ledges, the places where a single human could disappear. The frantic radio traffic from the command staff was a meaningless buzz in her ears. The only sound that pierced her concentration was the persistent, empty hiss of static from the channel assigned to Viper 1. It was the sound of vacuum, the sound of a mission falling apart. Her storm gray eyes never left her screen. She watched the 6 green dots freeze in place. She saw the red bloom of the ambush blossom around them. She didn't need to hear Commander Thorne's frantic, cut-off transmission to know what was happening. She had seen this exact pattern before. She had lived it. The map on her screen wasn't just showing a live feed. It was showing a ghost. A flicker of memory, sharp and unwelcome as a shard of glass under the skin. The same canyon. The same deafening silence on the columns. The same cold, creeping dread. 3 years ago, she hadn't been Alina Vance, the quiet systems analyst. She had been sniper observer call sign Echo of the elite Wraith Recon group. Her uniform hadn't been a sterile fleece jacket, but the heavy, worn-in fatigues of a mountain warfare specialist. Her world had been one of deep, bone-chilling cold, of wind that could strip the flesh from your bones, and of a silence broken only by the methodical rhythm of her own breathing. Her team, a band of 6 elite operators who had been her family, had died on those same rocks. They knew Serac's maw better than anyone. They had named every ridge, every crevice. The Widow's Needle had been their overwatch position, their sanctuary, their untouchable high ground. A junior analyst's voice, tight with panic, cut through her thoughts. Commander, 0 comms from Viper 1. All channels are jam solid. Satellite feed is showing heavy cloud cover moving in. No air support possible. Alina didn't react. She already knew. The patterns were identical. The static, the clouds, the precise location of the kill zone. It was a nightmare playing out on a loop, an old, bloody story the mountain had decided to retell. And she was the only one who knew how it ended. The image of the rifle flashed in her mind, cold and hard and real. The XR-9 Spectre. It sat in the back of the base armory, tagged, logged, and dismissed. A pariah. She had walked past it every day for a month, her path to the data center taking her by the armory doors. She had studied it, not just with her eyes, but with a quiet, tactile memory that went far beyond the weapon's official file. The rifle had been marked unreliable. Its file stated that in the extreme cold of high-altitude operations, the advanced optical scope's internal lens elements would form microscopic ice crystals, rendering it useless. The armorers, men who trusted data sheets over instinct, had labeled it a liability. But Alina had seen something they had missed. The problem wasn't the rifle. It was a design flaw born in a warm weather lab. The engineers hadn't accounted for the brutal, invasive cold of a place like Serac's Maw. 3 weeks ago, Under the cloak of a late-night systems update she herself had scheduled, she had slipped into the armory. A ghost in the shadows. The guard on duty, a bored-looking corporal named Miller, was more interested in a game on his datapad than the quiet tech who was supposedly running a weapons inventory diagnostic. "Don't touch the big toys, Ghost Tech," he'd quipped without looking up. "They bite." She had offered him a small, almost invisible smile. Her gaze was already fixed on the XR9. She signed into the digital log. Her temporary clearance for advanced weapons systems calibration, pre-approved by a system she herself maintained. The system, to its credit, didn't question her. It saw a user with the right credentials, not a quiet analyst from a forgotten corner of the base. In a 47-minute window that no one had noticed, she had worked with the precision of a watchmaker. She hadn't just fixed a rifle. She had transformed it. Using the base's high-end fabrication workshop, she had custom-machined a new housing for the scope's primary lens assembly. Woven into it was a micro-heating element, no thicker than a human hair, powered by the scope's own internal battery. It was a piece of bespoke engineering, a solution so elegant and specific that no one else would have even conceived of it. She had then recalibrated the scope for the unique atmospheric pressure and thermal dynamics of the Widow's Needle, a subtle tuning that turned the unreliable weapon into a surgical instrument. For her, it wasn't just a rifle. It was a promise, an oath made to the ghosts she had left behind on that mountain. Her team, Wraith Recon, had been her family. They were bound by the kind of trust forged only in shared hardship at the edge of the world. Their final mission in Serac's Maw was supposed to be a simple overwatch operation, providing security for a civilian convoy moving through the Northern Pass. But the intelligence had been a lie, deliberately compromised. What should have been a quiet watch had been a meticulously planned slaughter. Alina, as the team's overwatch, had been positioned on the Widow's Needle. She had watched, helpless, as her team was systematically annihilated below. The radios went dead, just as they had today. Her orders were absolute. Maintain radio silence. Do not compromise her position. Breaking it would have revealed not only her, but the convoy she was protecting to the enemy artillery waiting in the surrounding peaks. For 3 days, she had held her position, a ghost on a mountain she knew like the back of her hand, watching her family die one by one. The survivor's guilt had been a physical weight, a shroud of ice she had carried ever since. She had survived, but the price had been the lives of everyone she cared about. Now, in the command center, the past was collapsing into the present. Commander Thorne's last, desperate transmission, "We are in a kill zone," was an echo of her own silent screams from 3 years ago. The officers were scrambling, but they were fighting a ghost. They had no intel, no communication, no way to help. Alina's hands, resting on her keyboard, trembled with a contained, glacial fury. She watched the 6 green dots on her screen, motionless, a portrait of a team waiting for a fate she knew all too well. The map, once a static representation of terrain, had become a personal graveyard. She saw not just the ambush, but the faces of her team, their bodies falling on the same rocks, under the same iron-gray sky. It wasn't vengeance that drove her. Vengeance was a hot, messy emotion. Alina was a creature of cold, methodical precision. It was something far stronger, far more deeply ingrained. It was the unwavering, absolute certainty that she would not stand by and watch it happen again. Not when she had the power to intervene. Not when the pattern was so clear, so undeniably a repeat of her own personal hell. She had survived the mountain once by accident. This time, she would climb it by choice. Alina slowly took off her headset. The motion so quiet and deliberate it went unnoticed in the controlled chaos of the command center. She placed it on the desk with the care of someone handling a sacred object. She closed her laptop. The soft click of the latch was a final, decisive sound, a period at the end of a long chapter of her life. She stood up. Her small frame, which usually seemed to shrink into the background, now possessed a stark, undeniable presence. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't file a report. She didn't offer a single word of explanation. She simply turned and walked toward the armory, her steps a silent, determined rhythm against the tiled floor. The walk was a journey back in time. With every step, she shed the skin of Alina Vance, the quiet analyst. The familiar, acrid scent of gun oil, solvent, and cold steel hit her as she pushed open the heavy blast door. Corporal Miller, the guard, was exactly where she had left him weeks ago, still engrossed in a game on his datapad. He glanced up, annoyance flickering in his eyes as he recognized the ghost tech. "Hey, you can't be in here. This is a restricted," his voice trailed off. Alina didn't stop. She walked right past him, her storm gray eyes fixed on a specific rack in the far corner of the room. The XR-9 Spectre sat there, a silent sentinel, waiting. Miller's mouth hung open. His training, his protocols, everything screamed at him to challenge her, to demand her clearance. But the look in her eyes stopped him cold. It was an expression he had never seen on a support staffer. It was utterly devoid of fear, of hesitation, of anything but a vast, chilling certainty. It wasn't the look of a tech. It was the look of an apex predator returning to its hunting grounds. She reached for the rifle, her fingers long and slender from years at a keyboard, wrapped around the cold steel of the barrel with a familiar, almost forgotten intimacy. The worn polymer of the stock felt like an extension of her own arm. It was clean, cold, and ready. The recalibrated scope was a perfect, precise window, an extension of her own gaze. Her entire body hummed with a quiet, powerful energy, a silent conversation with the weapon, with the mountain, with her own past. Miller, now completely forgotten, could only watch as she unlatched the rifle from its rack and slung it over her shoulder. The weapon, once dismissed as a piece of unreliable junk, now looked like the only thing in the room that made any sense at all. She turned and walked out of the armory, the heavy door thudding shut behind her, leaving Corporal Miller standing in a silence that was more profound than the noise of any battle. Her mind was already on the mountain. It was a map of the Serac's maw, a detailed three-dimensional model of every rock, every shadow, every thermal draft. She saw the path to the Widow's Needle not as a series of punishing inclines, but as a journey home. The mountain was calling, and this time she would answer. To step through the outpost gates was to trade the sterile, man-made world for the raw, untamed fury of nature. Alina Vance, the XR-9 a solid weight across her back, moved with a silent purpose that seemed to belong more to the mountain than to the base she was leaving behind. Her boots bit into the hard-packed snow with a familiar, rhythmic crunch. She didn't check a map, didn't glance at a compass. The path was etched not on a digital screen, but in the scar tissue of her memory. The wind was her only companion, a constant, howling presence that sought to strip the warmth from her bones. It was the same high-altitude wind that had whispered secrets to her 3 years ago, a language of shifts and draft she had learned to read as intimately as a mother reads a child's face. The 2.6-kilometer ascent to the Widow's Needle was not a climb. It was a pilgrimage. To a soldier, the vertical gain would have been a grueling battle against gravity and exhaustion. To Alina, it was a return. Her small frame moved with a deceptive, wiry strength, her muscles working in a smooth, practiced rhythm. Every footfall was deliberate, every handhold chosen with an instinct born of experience. She moved like water flowing uphill, finding the path of least resistance with a preternatural grace. The cold steel of the rifle, even through the layers of her jacket, was a constant, grounding presence. It was a reminder of who she was before she had buried herself in data streams and server logs. It was a cold promise, an oath forged in steel and loss. As she climbed higher, the memories came. They weren't jarring flashbacks, but a seamless layering of past onto present. The sight of a particular granite outcropping brought the ghost of her team leader, Captain Eva Rostova, laughing as she taught her how to use the echo of a falling rock to gauge the depth of a crevasse. The way a snowdrift curved against a cliff face conjured the image of Alina, her spotter, whose keen eyes could spot the glint of an enemy scope from 2 kilometers away. They were all here, in the wind, in the snow, in the very air she breathed. They were her Wraith Recon. Her mind drifted back to the years of relentless training, forging a team that was more than a unit. They had been a family, bound by shared hardship and an unshakable trust. They were experts in silence, in shadows, in surviving on the ragged edges of the map. The mission in Serac's Maw was to have been their masterpiece. They believed they were untouchable. The climb continued, a silent, methodical dance with the mountain. Her breath was a controlled, internal furnace, each exhale a plume of white against the gray air. She was moving at a pace the base's tactical models would have deemed impossible for an unassisted climber, faster than her own personnel file, with its note of non-combat placement, would have ever suggested. She knew which game trail led to a thermal vent that could mask her heat signature, and which one led to a dead end. Her knowledge of the mountain was not a map. It was a personal archive of every footstep, every shadow, every heartbeat of the team she had lost. She remembered the moment her world had fallen apart. She had been in her overwatch position on this very spire, the XR9's predecessor, a steady weight in her hands. Her team was in position below. Then the comms went dead, not with a burst of static, but with a sudden, chilling silence. She had watched, helpless, as the ambush unfolded. The intel had been a lie. Her team had walked into a perfectly executed trap, and she, the Overwatch, was now a ghost, a witness to a massacre she could not prevent. Her orders had been absolute. Breaking silence would have given away her position and, more importantly, alerted the enemy to the humanitarian convoy moving through the lower valley, the very reason her team was there. For 3 days she had held her position, her body numb with cold, her mind a maelstrom of agony and guilt. She watched them die one by one. The cold had been her only companion. Then, on the 3rd day, she had seen it. The telltale plume of black smoke from a sheltered position in the distant hills. The enemy's mortar setup. They weren't targeting her team anymore. They were targeting the convoy. Her orders were still firm, but she had already lost her family. She would not watch as hundreds of innocent lives were extinguished. She had made a choice. 3 shots. 3 perfect, impossible shots that took out the enemy's forward observers. The convoy had escaped, but in those 3 shots, she had given up her position. What followed was a 6-day odyssey of survival, hunted by an entire battalion. She had survived by becoming one with the land. Now, as she neared the summit, she felt the change in the air pressure, the subtle shift in the wind. She was almost home. The rage, the guilt, the pain, it all receded, replaced by a cold, unwavering sense of purpose. This was not just a rescue. This was a reckoning. She had spent 3 years running from her past. Now, she was running toward it. Reaching the summit of the Widow's Needle was like stepping into a memory. The landscape of sharp, unforgiving rock and wind-scoured snow was unchanged, a silent monument to her past. She found her old position, the very scoop in the rock where she had spent 3 days watching her world die and 6 more days fighting to live. Her movements were not the frantic, hurried actions of a soldier under pressure, but the deliberate, graceful motions of an artist preparing her canvas. She slid the XR9 from her back, its cold steel a welcome, familiar presence in her hands. She set it down on the rock, the custom-machined bipod clicking into place with a sound that was both final and definitive. The rifle had been built for this moment, for this ridge, for this exact angle of fire. She lay prone, her body melting into the contours of the stone she knew so well. Looking through the scope, the valley below sprang into sharp, brutal focus. She saw the pinned-down green shapes of Viper 1. She saw the muzzle flashes of the remaining enemy soldiers, their fire now wild and panicked. And she saw the ghosts of her own team. She exhaled slowly, a long, controlled breath that misted in the cold air and was instantly torn away by the wind. Her mind became a blank slate. Her senses expanded, a heightened web of awareness that took in the wind speed, the humidity, the subtle drop in temperature. She was no longer Alina Vance, the analyst. She was Echo. She was home. She found her first target, the heavy machine gunner on the ledge to the left. He was the anchor of the enemy's position, the source of the relentless, punishing fire. In her mind, she saw the face of Leo, her own team's machine gunner, a man with a booming laugh who had died on that same side of the canyon. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The world narrowed to the space inside her scope. Thump! The rifle bucked against her shoulder, a solid, reassuring recoil. The round, a whisper of physics and intent, crossed the 2.6 kilometers of empty space in just over 2 seconds. The machine gunner collapsed. "This is for you, Leo," she whispered to the wind. Atonement. The battlefield below fell into a stunned silence. She ignored it, her movements fluid and economical as she acquired her next target. The enemy sniper perched high on the opposite cliff. His position gave him a commanding view, a perch of death. She thought of Alina, her spotter, the woman whose eyes had been her own, who had seen the world with a clarity Alina had always envied. Alina had died trying to draw the fire of a sniper, just like this one. Alina adjusted for the wind, a subtle shift of the crosshairs. Thump! The enemy sniper vanished from his perch. "We see them now, Alina. Justice. 2 shots. 2 threats neutralized." The remaining ambushers were now completely exposed, their leaders screaming orders that were lost in the growing panic. She saw the commander, a man with a beard and a radio, step out from behind cover, trying to restore order to his crumbling assault. He stood in the exact spot where her own captain, Eva Rostova, had made her last stand. Alina's breath was perfectly still. Her heart was a slow, steady drum. This was the man who had given the orders, the architect of her pain. Thump! The commander dropped without a sound. "The debt is paid, Captain. Vengeance and release." 3 shots. 3 ghosts laid to rest. She watched as the last of the enemy soldiers broke and fled into the wilderness. The kill zone was silent. Below, the 6 green dots of Viper 1 began to move, slowly, cautiously, like men waking from a nightmare. Alina didn't linger. The ritual was complete. She packed her rifle, leaving no trace of her presence, and began her descent, a ghost melting back into the storm. Back at Echo Ridge 12, the contained chaos had morphed into a state of stunned disbelief. The red bloom of hostile fire around Viper 1's position on the holographic map had vanished, replaced by a tense, green quiet. Colonel Eva Rostova stood before the display, her arms crossed, her face a mask of granite. She was a woman forged in the crucible of command, and she did not believe in miracles. She believed in data, and the data was telling her an impossible story. "Run it again," she commanded, her voice a low, dangerous growl that cut through the murmurs in the room. A young analyst, his face pale, tapped frantically at his console. "Sir, the data is clean. 3 distinct ballistic events originating from these coordinates. A laser point designated the sharp, isolated peak of the Widow's Needle on the holomap. Range 2.6 kilometers. All 3 impacts were direct hits on designated hostile command and support elements." Rostova's eyes narrowed. "That's impossible. Our own topographical surveys flagged that peak as unscalable for tactical deployment. There are no friendly sniper teams in that sector. None. 0. The data is the data, Colonel," the analyst stammered, shrinking under her gaze. The impossible had happened, and Eva Rostova intended to find out how. She began pulling files, her fingers flying across her terminal. Every sniper in the sector, their qualifications, their current deployments. Nothing. She pulled the armory logs. A flurry of standard issue checkouts, but nothing that could reach out over 2.5 kilometers with that kind of precision. Nothing except an anomaly. An XR-9 Spectre, a weapon officially deemed non-operational, had been signed out for a systems calibration by a low-level analyst and returned with 3 fewer rounds in its magazine. The log entry was time-stamped during the exact window of the firefight. Meanwhile, Thorne's team was being debriefed in a secure chamber. They spoke in low, reverent tones, not of a battle, but of a deliverance. They spoke of a guardian angel, a ghost on the needle. Jake, hotshot. Riley, his usual swagger completely gone, was the most affected. "It was perfect, Colonel," he said to Rostova over the secure video link. The shots were like thunder. Whoever was up there, they weren't just shooting. They were sending a message. Rostova listened, her expression unreadable. She had a ghost in her machine, a phantom who had defied physics and protocol to save 6 of her men. This wasn't just a breach of regulations. It was an act of war carried out by an unregistered, unknown combatant operating from within her own base. And Eva Rostova would find them. The clue was almost invisible. A faint dusting of fine, crystalline powder on the floor tiles by an analyst's workstation in the quietest corner of the command center. To anyone else, it was just dust. But Rostova had run a geological survey of the region herself years ago. She recognized the unique mineral composition. It was biotite mica, found in significant quantities in only one place in the entire mountain range, the summit of the Widow's Needle. She summoned Alina Vance to her office. The room was austere, a reflection of the woman herself. Polished steel, dark wood, and a single, unadorned map of the region on the wall. The air was heavy, charged with a silence that felt more potent than any shouted command. Alina stood before the desk, ramrod straight, her hands clasped loosely in front of her, her face a serene, unreadable mask. She was once again the ghost tech, a small, quiet presence in a room built for power. But Rostova saw through the disguise. "The data doesn't lie, Vance," Rostova began, her voice low and even. She didn't consult a file. She had memorized it all. 2.6 kilometers. 3 shots. Surgical precision from a position my best mountaineers have flagged as impossible. An XR-9 rifle, which has been on the scrap heap for a year, is suddenly operational. And the dust from the only place those shots could have come from is on the floor by your desk. I'm not asking you if you did it. I'm asking you to tell me how. The silence in the room stretched, tight as a wire. Alina could feel the weight of the colonel's gaze, the quiet, measured power of a woman who had seen too much to be fooled. This was a language she understood better than words, a language she herself had spoken for 3 long years. She met Rostova's eyes, not with defiance, but with a quiet, weary understanding. Her voice, when it came, was a low, even tone, a whisper in the vast, empty space of the office. "Because I used to be buried there, Colonel." The words were not a confession. They were a key, unlocking a door she had sealed shut with concrete and steel 3 years ago. The office, the cold air, the hard mahogany, it all faded away, replaced by the ghost of a memory. A story buried in the military's most restricted archives. A story of a unit that had been erased. She told Rostova everything. About Wraith Recon. About Captain Eva Rostova, her mentor and friend. About the compromised intel, the brutal ambush, and the ghost who had refused to die. She explained her absolute orders to maintain silence to protect the convoy, the agony of watching her team, her family, be slaughtered below. "I had a rifle," she said, her voice hollow. "I had the skill. I had the opportunity. But I also had a mission. A promise to 200 souls I had never met. The lives of my family in the canyon, or the lives of a city of strangers. It was a choice no one should ever have to make." She described the 3 days of watching, the frostbite, the guilt, and then the mortar team targeting the convoy. She described making the choice to fire, the 3 shots that saved the civilians but gave up her position. She told of the 6-day hunt that followed, of surviving against an entire battalion, of becoming a phantom of the mountain. When she returned, broken but alive, she had refused the medals, the promotions, the special roles. She had asked only for a quiet corner where she could disappear. She chose to become a ghost. The office came back into focus. Colonel Rostova was looking at her with a new expression, a mixture of profound awe and dawning comprehension. The ghost stories, the whispers, the restricted files, they were all her. Rostova looked at the sparse personnel file on her desk. Subject displays classical survivor's guilt. Tactical proficiency is exceptional. Recommend non-combat placement. Combat capacity untested. She looked up at Alina, her eyes asking the question the file could not answer. Her combat capacity hadn't been untested. It had been forged in the coldest fires of hell. And she, the colonel who had dismissed her as a quiet tech, now saw her for what she truly was: a warrior, a survivor, a legend. The standard protocol would have been a court-martial. Insubordination, unauthorized use of military assets, desertion of post. But Eva Rostova was not a woman who lived by standard protocols. She was a woman who lived by results. And the result was that 6 of her men were alive when they should have been dead. She closed Alina's file with a quiet, decisive thud. The sound echoed in the silence of the office. She had seen the truth, a truth too profound to be contained within the sterile language of military regulations. "You won't be returning to your desk," Rostova said, her voice firm. "You will not be allowed to fade back into the shadows. Your skills are too valuable to be wasted on server maintenance." She offered Alina a new role, one that didn't officially exist. An off-the-books instructor, a mentor for a new generation of elite marksmen. Alina accepted with a reluctant, almost weary resignation. Her quiet life was over. Her classroom was not a firing range with paper targets and a stopwatch. Her classroom was the mountain itself. The training ground was the widow's needle, a place of both profound pain and ultimate salvation. The first class was a hand-picked group of special operations volunteers. They came seeking advanced ballistics, windage calculations, and trigger pull techniques. They were surprised to find that for the first week, they were not even allowed to touch a rifle. Alina's teaching method was unconventional, born from a lifetime of experience. She taught them to breathe with the mountain, to feel the subtle shifts in the wind on their skin, to read the shadows as if they were a language. "What do you hear?" she would ask a young trainee. "The wind, ma'am." "And what don't you hear?" The pause always came. It was the pause of a mind struggling to comprehend a question it had never been asked before. "The birds, ma'am. They stopped singing 3 minutes ago. Something's moving in Sector 7. This was the core of her teaching. It was not about the trigger pull, but about a complete and total awareness, a merging of the mind, the mission, and the terrain. The rifle, she would tell them, was just the last word in a long conversation they were having with the world around them. Her philosophy was distilled into 3 principles. Patience defeats panic. Invisible beats invincible. The mountain remembers everything. Her best student was a young sergeant named Kadim, a man with a quiet, observant demeanor that reminded Alina of herself. He absorbed her lessons not as techniques, but as a philosophy. Months later, Kadim's team was pinned down in a tense standoff in a hostile desert environment. Trapped, comms jammed, retreat cut off. The situation was a mirror of the one in Serac's maw. Kadim could feel the panic rising. But then he remembered Alina's lessons. He didn't force a shot. He became a ghost in the desert, listening. He waited for 9 hours. He waited for the perfect moment. When the wind was just right, when the enemy commander was silhouetted against the rising sun, when the heat shimmer blinded the enemy spotter. He waited, and then he took 2 shots, 2 surgical hits that saved his entire team. When he returned, he gave an interview about the mission. "Before you even touch a rifle," he said, his voice a low, reverent tone, "learn to listen. The mountain speaks first." It was a quote he had learned from a quiet, unassuming systems analyst, a ghost who had taught him that true precision came not from a rifle, but from a complete and total awareness. Alina's legacy was beginning. Then one morning, Alina was gone. The base had no record of her transfer, no exit debrief, no official goodbye. On the desk in her small, Spartan quarters, cleaned and perfectly placed, was the XR9 Spectre. Beside it, a small, leather-bound notebook. A single line was written inside. "I don't leave traces. I leave vision." The final security footage showed her walking out of the main gate at 3:47, carrying only a standard hiking pack. Her transponder signal vanished exactly where the trail to the widow's needle began. Search crews combed the area for weeks, but found nothing. It was as if the mountain, her oldest friend and adversary, had finally welcomed her home, taking her in as one of its own. But her legacy did not disappear. The widow's needle became a discreet, unofficial training site for elite snipers from across the world. Every year, on the anniversary of the day she rescued Viper 1, a silent group makes the pilgrimage to the summit. They stand for 1 full minute, overlooking the canyon below. And in every mind, a single figure stands quietly, a ghost in the wind, a silent protector. Her handwritten notes continue to appear on the summit, carved into stone or written on weatherproof scraps of paper left under a rock. Patience defeats panic. Invisible beats invincible. The mountain remembers everything. Make sure it remembers you with respect. The plaques, the notes, the whispers, it was her legacy. It was the vision she had left behind. She had taught them that legends don't need names. They only need the courage to show up when it matters most. And for the soldiers who climbed the widow's needle, who learned to listen to the mountain, they knew the quiet truth. Alina Vance had never left. She was still there, in the wind, in the snow, in the heart of every soldier she had taught. She was a legend, a ghost, a myth made real. And her lessons would save lives long after the teacher was gone. Thank you for staying with us and for listening to the story of Alina Echo Vance, a true ghost in the machine. Her story is a powerful reminder that some of the greatest heroes don't wear medals or hold high rank. They are the ones who operate in the quietest corners, who carry burdens no one else can see, and who find the strength to act when all hope seems lost. Her legacy wasn't built on a pedestal, but was etched into the unyielding rock of a mountain she knew better than anyone. It's a legacy of silence, of patience, of knowing that the greatest weapon isn't the rifle in your hands, but the wisdom in your heart. Alina taught us that true precision comes not from a perfect shot, but from a complete and total awareness, a profound connection to the world around us. She showed us that a legend isn't about what you take from the world, but what you choose to leave behind. She left behind a vision, a way of seeing the world that continues to save lives long after she became one with the mountain. Her story is a testament to the fact that some promises, forged in the fires of loss and survival, are too sacred to be broken. They're the promises we make to ourselves and to the memory of those who are gone. Here on our channel, we believe these are the stories that matter most. We believe that legends aren't just characters in a book or names on a plaque. They are the quiet, everyday people who find the courage to show up when it counts. If Alina's story spoke to something inside you, if it reminded you that courage isn't always a loud roar, but often a silent, unwavering decision, we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments below what part of her story resonated with you the most. Please comment with respect. We hope you'll join us on our journey. If you want to keep hearing stories of the unseen heroes, of the quiet protectors, and of the legends that live on in the shadows, please hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss another tale. Give this video a like if you believe that sometimes the greatest acts of bravery are the ones that no one ever sees. And if you're ready for another story, please check out the videos appearing on your screen right now. Until next time, stay safe out there, and always remember to listen for the quiet whispers that the world has to offer.